Keith Harold Stephen Stevens. Reminiscence on the Second World War between the dates of 1940 to 1946, covering 10 countries: Ireland, North Africa, Malta, Sicily, Italy, Egypt, India, Burma, Thailand and Vietnam. I joined the RAF 152 Spitfire Squadron, eventually becoming 7152 Echelon Squadron. We were able to work on the Spitfires, 4 machine guns, 2 cannon and 2 500-pound bombs under each wing. 1940 to 1941, 152 RAF Squadron, owned and paid for by the Nizam of Hyderabad. I joined the LDVR, Local District Volunteer Reserve, later to be known as the Home Guard. I joined the Signal Section. We paraded in the local drill hall in Enfield. Later we were issued with Lee Enfield rifles and 1 round of ammunition. We were kitted out in uniforms, including armbands with HG on them, denoting that we belonged to the Home Guard. The Signal Section consisted of an ex-merchant seaman, and he was our corporal. Friends of mine named Reese, King, Bales and Heath were also in the Signal Section. During the constant night after night bombing on London and the suburb, the Enfield Small Arms Factory became a target. Landmines were dropped on Enfield, causing damage to the shops. Most of the windows were blown out onto the pavement. We were ordered to patrol both ends of the town in case of looters. We were patrolling all night until we were relieved in the morning. As the Signal Section, we were sent to lay telephone cable around the great woods at Cuffley, Northaw and Littleburg Hampstead area. We also had to inspect the pillboxes and the square blocks of concrete to be somehow placed across the road in case of an invasion. Our headquarters, conveniently, the Rising Sun. After rifle training, we used to take all our equipment home. And one evening I was cleaning my rifle up in my bedroom when it fired a bullet past my left foot, through the floor, into the dining room below, creating a hole in the dining room ceiling with plaster all over the carpet. My parents, out at the time, returned home to an anxious son. And then after all, it was wartime, so they forgave me. To this day, how all this happened, I will never know. In April 1941, 5 of us from the Signal Section of the Home Guard decided to volunteer for the armed forces. We were to meet at Uxbridge, RAF Centre, but only 2 of us turned up. The other 3 had decided to join the Tank Corps. That day I took the oath and volunteered for the RAF. My volunteer call-up papers arrived on the 8th of May, 1941. I was ordered to Cardington Training Centre to be kitted out in RAF uniform and then sent to Skegness for a PT course. I was then sent home to await a posting to an RAF unit. My posting came through for me to go to Swanton Morley in Norfolk to join 152 Spitfire Squadron. I had a short spell of training on the Spitfires, 4 machine guns. The cannon and bombs were to come later. We left Swanton Morley for a course of training at West Wittering. As a fighting squadron unit, we were sent to Tenby in Wales, and then on to the Isle of Anglesey. We were now operational. During the day, the Spitfires covered the shipping lanes around the coast in that area. After these operations, we were replaced by another squadron and ordered to go to Ireland. We crossed the North Channel from Stranraer to Larne in Ireland, arriving later at Eglinton Airdrome near Londonderry. We had leave to visit Londonderry. Some of us went to the local cinema, not to see a film, but to have tea, served by a lovely colleen called Sadie. Eglinton, on the edge of Lost Foyle, at a large airfield. The Americans used to pilot new Spitfires for practice onto the runway. Unfortunately, they pranged several craft. I understand they were not used to shorter flight paths. And after about 6 months, and it had rained nearly every day, we were told we were going to North Africa. North Africa, 1942. We left England, either from Portsmouth or Southampton docks, in a troop ship. The name escapes me. It was a very large ship carrying a number of Army and RAF personnel. Passing through the Bay of Biscay, most of us experienced being violently sick. The weather was appalling. We had quarters below deck, sleeping in hammocks. We were called upon to keep in trim by physical exercises and various duties around the ship. The Atlantic was rough, but the Mediterranean was smooth and calm. We passed Gibraltar in semi-darkness and continued on to arrive at our destination, Algiers. The ship docked in the port of Algiers, and we embarked, preparing to camp on the beach, erecting bivouacs to sleep in. And all night we heard constant fire coming from Algiers. Next day, with full pack, we marched about 3 miles to the airfield at Maison Blanc. On arriving, we were warned not to pick up from around the perimeter any articles such as pens, wallets, etc., left on the ground, because they would be booby-trapped, having been dropped from German planes at night time. We left Maison Blanc to travel by transport to our permanent airstrip at Souk El Arras. After pitching our tents, we took transport into Constantine and settled down in a cafe to order a drink. We drank ouzo for a little time. And then we looked around Constantine itself. We returned to our billet to be told that one of the transport vehicles had been hit by a train at a level crossing. 12 died. 3 friends of mine. At Constantine Cemetery, we buried them. I helped to carry one of my friends on a stretcher. I noticed his bare feet were tied together. He was covered in a hessian bag, as no coffins were available at that time. We used 2 airstrips in North Africa, Souk El Aras and Souk El Chemist, A flight and B flight. Each flight comprised of 6 Spitfires. We only flew during the day. We were not equipped for night flying. One day our intelligence unit informed us that a formation of Messerschmitt 109s were in the vicinity, heading our way. We scrambled A flight, as B flight was already out on patrol, to intercept and engage the enemy. A dogfight over the airstrip took place, with the Messerschmitt 109s showing superior maneuverability. We watched from our bunkers as 2 Spitfires were shot down, and a third disappeared, smoke belching from the back, over the hills. A Canadian pilot, a friend of mine, was one who died shot down near the airstrip. Meanwhile, we had been strapped on the ground, knocking out several aircraft before they sped off. On another day, we were resting outside our hut on the perimeter, when out of the sky, suddenly, from nowhere, a Heinkel appeared. This big lumbering aircraft proceeded up the runway. A startled, amazed look on the visible pilots' and co-pilots' faces. The pilot pushed full throttle forward for height and lumbered away. We had no ground guns, and our own Spitfires were away on patrol. And as far as we knew, he had mistaken our airstrip for his. We were quite near the borders. We lost nearly a squadron of Spitfires during German raids on the airfield at Souk El Aras. We had to be re-equipped with the latest Spitfires, Spitfire 9, with 2 cannons, 1 on either wing. This would give a firing power of 4 machine guns and 2 cannons. For entertainment, we decided to have a variety show. We had on the flights various artists, singers, comedians, acrobats, etc. And I was asked to produce the show. We had electricians, carpenters, and plenty of volunteers to get to work to build a stage. We had 2 excellent comedians, but I thought their crosstalk needed pepping up, so I suggested they turn their straight act into a drunken act. The show was a great success over 2 nights, and one of the nights we had a raid. But our spirits were high and we continued on after the night raid. The commanding officer congratulated all who took part. I caught malaria, the temperature 107. I took a lot of quinine. It was given me for several days until I finally recovered. We were part of the First Army under General Alexander. Because the 8th Army was in difficulties over the advancement of Field Marshal Rommel, we were to leave our present position to advance to Sousse in Tunisia to support the 8th Army. On the way to Sousse, we stopped at Carthage, and a friend of mine, Kenneth Malcolmson, and myself visited the magnificent cathedral, and it was very imposing inside as well as outside. After this we continued in convoy formation into Tunisia onto Sousse. Approaching a cross-section, road and rail, we heard a droning sound of an aircraft. As we were still in part enemy territory, we quickly left the convoy to take what cover we could find. Most of the surrounding land was barren, and we were lying on open ground. A lone German Stuka appeared heading our way. He was going for the intersection, rail road, to drop his bombs. The sound of a diving Stuka is really terrifying, especially if you are in the open without any cover. We were only about 300 yards from the intersection. My friend next to me was frantically trying to dig himself into the ground with his tin helmet. Not successful at all. After the diving, whining Stuka had dropped his bomb, he turned his attention to our convoy on his way home. For good measure, he strafed the trucks, not us, thank God. Thankfully no one was hurt, only holes in the trucks. We proceeded on to our destination, Sousse. We arrived at Sousse and camped on a hill overlooking the sea and Sousse. That night was very reminiscent of November the 5th. Guns, bombs, incendiary bombs lit up Sousse. Thankfully, next day all was quiet and we were able to go to the beach for a wash and swim. And our next destination was to be Malta. Malta, 1943. We flew from Sousse into Tel Cali Airport in Malta. Camp was made in tents on the side of the hills around the aerodrome. Malta, not under siege anymore, only spasmodic attacks from the air occurred less and less as time went on. The aerodrome had underground tunnels hewn out of solid rock. They were very deep and wide. The tunnels had been used during the constant and heavy bombardment on the Italian and German aircraft during the crucial days at the beginning of the war. Valletta, the capital, still attracted the servicemen stationed on the island. The catacombs were of great interest to us, visiting them for the first time. We saw old women make different designed lace patterns to be sold to the service personnel on the island. Accommodation was at last located for us at Slima, so we decamped from the tents on the hillside and moved down into the row of houses on the front. Mayor and I visited the houses in Slima in 1982, and as they had been redecorated, I had difficulty in locating the terraced house I stayed in. Still, it was nice to have visited Slima. I caught sandfly fever and ended up in the island's hospital for about a week. I met a friend from the squadron. He also had been ill. We moved into an apartment because our squadron had meanwhile moved on to Sicily. We stayed in the apartment until we were able to rejoin our squadron in Sicily. We sold cigarettes, enabling us to buy food, to take back and eat in the apartment. Tombola was the rage in Malta. In every street they played the game. On the perimeter track near the runway were Nissen huts, used by the airmen during the German and Italian air attacks of 1941 and 1942. Several names of those airmen who died during those attacks, also names of those pilots who died defending the island, appeared on the walls. Malta received the George Cross. We left Malta to rejoin the squadron in Sicily. Sicily, 1943. Arriving at Lentini Aerodrome near Catania, we rejoined our squadron. Just arrived on the squadron two Polish pilots, and they had some harrowing tales to tell about the invasion of Poland by the Nazis, and about the Polish pilots who died defending their country. On an old gramophone, we used to play the tune Warsaw Concerto. They liked to listen to the record. Orders were given for us to leave Lentini Aerodrome and make our way in convoy to Messina. On the way to Messina, we passed several damaged 88mm guns and a discarded Sherman tank. We stopped at some makeshift graves, a mound of earth with a rifle stuck in it, with a British helmet on the rifle butt, denoting a British grave. Some had crude wooden crosses on a mound of earth. As night approached, we decided to make camp. As it happened, our camp was under Mount Etna. Luckily, we were able to have a swim in the stream and using soap for the first time for some days. We descended the road leading into the town of Messina, where we were to board an open-ended landing craft to take us to the beach at Salerno in Italy. Italy, 1943. Lying down in an open-ended landing craft, we were escorted into the beach at Salerno by amphibious craft. We were lying down in case a shell, being fired from a gun emplacement up in the hills, landed nearby or on us. The whine of the shells, given the name moaning minis, the incredible large guns were on retractable wheels, running forward, fire, retract backwards on huge sleepers, then reload. Some days later, the gun was put out of action by the Allies. Salerno, on the west coast of Italy, had been one of the beaches used for the invasion of Italy. The invasion cost the lives of many men, a bloodbath until the capture of the beach head. We operated a few sorties from Salerno airstrip. The Spitfires returned undamaged. We advanced to Naples, but first we visited a small village called Battipaglio. This village had been devastated during the invasion. On this short trip to Naples, we stopped at a deserted villa I went inside and looked around, and I came across a huge mahogany desk. In one of the drawers I found some Mussolini symbols and medal ribbons. I took these objects as war souvenirs. From Naples I was able to visit Pompeii and sit in the amphitheatre. On leaving Naples for Bari, on the east side of Italy, to the airstrip called Gio del Colle. The airstrip was outside Bari, but I visited the town and was struck by the promenade lined with palm trees and with the waves from the sea crashing onto the beach. I saw the opera house in Bari. It was of course closed, but the Italian opera stars lined the building in poster form. In Bari we met some English-speaking Italians who invited us back to their house for a spaghetti meal. In return we gave them tins of bully beef and chocolates, also the usual cigarettes. That night we drank rather a lot of vino. Within a week or so we were informed we were to go on to Alexandria, Egypt, 1943. Arriving in Egypt, we spent only a short time in Alexandria before heading for the Suez Canal, boarding a ship to take us down the canal into the Red Sea. On board, moving down the canal, one can see the actual curvature of the world. The canal seemed relatively narrow, and at times one felt there was very little to spare either side in places. We moved into the Red Sea and then into the Gulf of Aden, passing Aden, on into the Arabian Sea, heading for Bombay, India. It is with regret for my own thoughts I cannot remember much about my time in Alexandria and how I spent my days there and how I arrived at the Suez Canal. India, 1943-1944. Arriving into the harbour at Bombay, I was struck by the grandness of the buildings. We were quickly on our way to Tulihole Airdrome, where we were to be billeted in nice cool veranda-style sleeping quarters. After a short time on the airdrome, acclimatizing ourselves to the hot weather, we were eventually to leave Tulihole Airdrome by train to go to Bagachi outside Calcutta. The journey to Calcutta, about 2,000 miles, took several days and many stops. The local children begged for chocolates and biscuits. We gave them what we could afford, although our rations were pretty meagre. I remember sleeping in the overhead luggage racks, larger racks than on our trains, for most of the long journey. Arriving at Dum Dum airstrip outside Calcutta, we settled down to await our call to go on to Chittagong. We visited Calcutta, buying small trinkets and leather goods, and I visited the cathedral called Victoria, after Queen Victoria, of course. We also went along to the Tok H Talbot House, started at Ypres in memory of Gilbert Talbot, society with many branches carrying on comradeship from the war. This TOC H was a leave hostel, mainly for those at the front returning to Calcutta for a rest period. I caught prickly heat and blisters on chest and back, and spent a few days recuperating at the TOC H. After recovering from the illness, I flew with the squadron from Dum Dum to Chittagong Airdrome, the springboard into Burma, with the Japanese in retreat except for pockets scattered around Imphal. We flew into Imphal to an airstrip called Kang. The pockets of Japanese surrounded Imphal on all sides. This was known as being in the box, completely boxed in. Some supplies had arrived by road convoy, but now the main road had been cut. All our supplies had to be flown in by plane. That night we guarded the Spitfires and other planes by patrols, but the Japanese managed to infiltrate onto the airstrip and set fire to as many aircraft as possible, causing mayhem at night. General Wavell arrived to give us a pep talk. Lord Mountbatten also had given a talk when we were in Chittagong. These pep talks were to boost our morale and generally ended in tumultuous cheers. I caught amoebic dysentery and had to go to a field hospital for treatment. One day in the field hospital I heard a stick tapping on the end of the line of beds. The tapping stopped at the bottom of my bed. When I opened my eyes, who should be standing there but my brother Tony. His battalion had been up in the hills near Imphal. He had heard that my squadron was on Caen airstrip. Tony was an artillery captain in the army. For me to fully recover, Tony suggested a recuperating leave in Calcutta. We flew out of Imphal and into Calcutta. Tony and I spent an enjoyable time in Calcutta, staying in a small ground floor flat down a side road. As well as shopping in Calcutta, we visited the Cathedral Victoria. Of course, the time came when I had to return to the squadron, which had moved to Sindh in India, and Tony had to return to his unit. At Sindh, I had told my name had been put forward for home leave. SEAC, Southeast Asia Command, arranged flights home. My parents were delighted to see me. I was dressed in jungle attire, bush hat, sweat tunic and long trousers. My father took me to the Constitutional Club in Enfield, and he made a great fuss of me. Well, now at least one son was home for a short time. I had 28 days leave before I returned to Burma by ship. 1944, 1945. The Strathclyde entered the harbour at Karachi, and we flew to the airstrip at Tammu in Burma. The squadron had been sent from Sindh to Tammu after being severely bombed, causing several wounded to be transferred back to Chittagong. Several of the wounded were from my squadron. The monsoon weather descended on us, and the Spitfires were grounded for several days. During the monsoon, we had to lash the Spitfires down in case they were damaged by the torrential rain and increasing wind. At this time, I had talks with the local Burmese, I asked one of them if he would exchange his handsome knife. He settled for a bar of chocolate. I have the knife today. As the monsoon abated, we made several sorties. A sergeant pilot called Smithy came back from patrol, did a victory roll over the airstrip. He had shot down a Jap MiG, and this was later confirmed. We were eventually told we were off to Bangkok in Thailand. Thailand, or Siam, 1945. We were billeted on the aerodrome called Don Muang. The Thai Air Force had their accommodation the other side of the perimeter, so we were able to meet each other. We are on very good terms with the Thais. They were friendly and trustworthy. I made friends with the captain of the Thai Air Force. He was known as Swat Cap, Captain. This led to a friendship with Yutachai Nam Tips, a Thai Air Force cadet training to be a pilot. He wrote to me in 1947 to say he had married and had a baby boy. He named Chota Keith, Little Keith. We had leave to visit Bangkok. The buildings were beautiful, especially the temple called Wax, in their array of various colours and the formation of the layers of gold roofing. We visited the King of Siam's Oriental Palace and also his modern palace. The Oriental Palace was magnificent, covered in gold, and we could only see the Oriental Palace from a distance, not allowed to go close. The modern palace was open to all. Whilst in Bangkok, I bought a Cease Icon German camera, paying a bar of chocolate for it. One day we were notified that the ceremonial handing over the Japanese sword would be taking place. This was part of the Japanese ritual. In defeat, the Japanese had to give their most precious object over to the enemy, their swords. I received my sword from a Japanese officer. There were a few defeated Japanese soldiers in and around Bangkok. On seeing us, they came to attention and saluted, and protocol demanded we return their salutes. We were going to Vietnam. After making many Thai friends, we were sorry to be leaving Don Muang Aerodrome for Thailand. Vietnam, French Indochina, 1945 to 1946. Vietnam was to be the last country before I returned to England. Approaching Saigon, the cathedral stood majestically before you enter the main street. We were billeted in bashers, woven reed to form an oblong building. I had a number 2 Dobie boy. He was an Annamite, Vietnamese, to clean out the basher and wash our laundry, etc. These Annamites were not to be trusted. I know they disliked us. They had sided with the Japanese. A lot of food went missing, and we had to keep a close eye on our guns and ammunition. They had been caught thieving. Sometimes, in the evenings, walking in Saigon, you felt uneasy, as if you were being watched. On the 2nd of January 1946, I and a friend were to leave Saigon for Secunderabad in India. We had completed our 4 years overseas duty. We arrived in Secunderabad to the aerodrome, and we were put in charge of the armoury. And now we were waiting to be sent on to Calcutta and then to Karachi. We stayed on the aerodrome at Secunderabad, keeping the equipment in order in the armoury. We had 2 Indian Air Force boys to help us named Krishna and Krishnam. We often went swimming in the nearby pool. It was a great relief and a good exercise. We finally left Secunderabad for Calcutta. On arriving in Calcutta, we decided to spend a few days on our own before reporting in to go on to Karachi. We checked in for bed and breakfast and other meals. We watched Indians play cricket on the great expanse of greenery in the middle of Calcutta. Probably not there today. We finally, after a few more days, reported for transfer to Karachi. The troop ship Strathmore brought us home to England. I was demobbed in 1946. This is only a summary of 4 years spent abroad in the RAF. Some things, of course, I have not said. Some things remain personal. I lost a lot of friends, and that hurt a lot. But in the end, I suppose it was all worth it.